If you get dermal filler and then go like run a marathon in 90-degree heat, you aren't just burning calories. You're actually actively supercharging a microscopic enzyme that is literally eating your cosmetic procedure alive.
Which is, slightly terrifying when you phrase it that way.
I mean, it's the truth. So welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at hyaluronic acid fillers, and the stack of clinical studies we have completely shatters this old idea that these are just, static, inert implants sitting under your skin.
Yeah, they really aren't. We are looking at a highly dynamic, totally invisible battlefield.
Right.
The rheological data, the thermal stress tests, the enzymatic degradation kinetics, they all point to the same conclusion. From the literal millisecond that hyaluronic acid enters the tissue, it is just under constant assault.
Assault from what exactly?
Well, from your basal body temperature, your mechanical facial movements, and your own endogenous enzymes.
It reminds me of like building a highly engineered sandcastle on a beach. The tide is your metabolism.
That's a great way to look at it, actually.
Yeah. And so if you're doing high-intensity interval workouts every day, you're essentially summoning a hurricane. You're guaranteeing those waves are going to wash that sandcastle away much faster.
Exactly. And the physiological mechanisms behind that faster dissipation are, well, they're brutally efficient.
How so?
Because high-intensity exercise triggers a hypermetabolic state. You're elevating the core body temperature and simultaneously driving massive localized blood flow, which is called hypersemia, right to the skin to dump that excess heat.
So your face gets flushed.
Right, yeah. And that specific combination of elevated local tissue temperature and increased blood flow is just the perfect catalyst for endogenous hyaluronidase.
Which is the natural enzyme your body produces to break down native hyaluronic acid anyway.
Exactly. And the thing is, it doesn't distinguish between your native HA and the expensive synthetic HA that was just injected into your tissue.
Oh, wow. So it just attacks all of it.
It really does.
Yeah.
The heat basically accelerates the enzyme's kinetic activity. Furthermore, extreme physical exertion spikes oxidative stress.
Right, like free radicals.
Yeah, you have reactive oxygen species flooding the tissue. And the clinical data shows that these free radicals physically bombard the cross-linked polymer network of the filler.
Wait, really? So they're damaging it directly?
Yeah, they destabilize the structural integrity of the gel before the enzyme even gets a chance to do its job.
That is wild. And it casts that standard medical advice to, avoid the gym for 24 hours in a totally different light. I mean, it's clearly not just about waiting for the filler to simply settle.
No, not at all. We are talking about aggressive fluid dynamics here.
Because HA is actively hydrophilic, right? It loves water.
Exactly. It's aggressively hydrophilic. So that localized hypergemia from heavy lifting essentially turns the fresh filler into a fluid sink.
I see. So it just absorbs everything.
Yeah, the HA molecules act like sponges. They draw in the excess vascular fluid that's rushing to the area.
Which I'm guessing is why people get so puffy if they work out too soon after an injection.
Right. You amplify the localized puffiness. But even more critically, you stress the capillary network.
Because the needles.
Yeah, those tiny vessels are actively healing from the trauma of the cannula or the needle. So spiking your systemic blood pressure by, say, deadlifting heavy weights puts immense hydrostatic pressure on those fragile, compromised capillaries.
That sounds like a recipe for a massive bruise.
It is. The risk of severe bruising or even a delayed vascular complication just skyrocket.
Okay, so wait. If I'm a marathon runner, I do a lot of hot yoga. Am I literally sweating out my expensive filler?
Well, no. You weren't literally sweating it out through your pores. But the elevated core temperature and the increased blood flow are supercharging the body's natural breakdown mechanisms.
Okay, that makes sense. And we also can't ignore the sheer mechanical friction involved, especially for something like labial fillers, lip injections.
Oh, absolutely.
Because when someone is engaged in heavy physical exertion, they aren't just passively sweating. They are grimacing, they're breathing heavily, they're intensely compressing the orbicularis oris muscle around the mouth.
Yeah, and that is a phenomenal example of targeted mechanical shear stress.
Shear stress.
Right, it's the constant friction in the perioral area during exercise. Combined with the local tissue temperature shifts, it just creates a perfect storm for degradation.
Because you're literally squeezing the product.
Exactly. The physical compression physically strains the 3D polymer network. It pulls at the crosslinks, and that exposes the vulnerable backbone of the HA chain to that upregulated hyaluronidase we just talked about.
Right, and I mean, this is exactly why manufacturers use chemical cross-linking agents like BDD in the first place, right?
Yeah, they have to.
Because if you just injected native, uncross-linked hyaluronic acid into a highly mobile, high-friction area like the lips, the mechanical shear stress and enzymes would just obliterate it in, what, 48 hours?
Pretty much, yeah. The BDDE, which stands for 1-difutyl butanediol diglycidyl ether, is what allows material to survive at all.
It's essentially the glue.
Right. It binds the individual HA chains together, which creates a resilient three-dimensional matrix. And this elevates the G prime, which is the elastic modulus, giving the filler its ability to resist deformation.
Okay, so just to clarify for everyone listening, a high G' filler acts like a rigid, tightly bound matrix that can mimic bone structure, like if you're building a cheekbone.
Exactly.
Whereas a lower G' filler has a looser cross-link structure that flows better in dynamic high-movement areas like the lips or the nasolabial folds.
That's spot on. But, regardless of the G prime, the clinical consensus across these sources is unavoidable.
Which is that internal metabolic heat fundamentally compromises the cross-link network.
Yes, which actually introduces a massive diagnostic hurdle for researchers.
Oh, how so?
Well, if local tissue temperature shifts are the primary driver of this enzymatic breakdown, how do we accurately quantify the thermal stress the skin is actually experiencing during exercise?
Oh, right. Measuring that accurately sounds like a nightmare.
Sure.
But we actually have a fascinating study from PLOS, one that tackles this exact methodological problem, don't we?
Yes, we do. And it's a great study.
So researchers put 30 healthy males inside a climate chamber set to a punishing 38 degrees Celsius. That's 100 degrees Fahrenheit?
It's incredibly hot for a controlled experiment.
Right. And they have them cycle at a constant 120 watts for 30 minutes just to induce maximal thermal and metabolic stress.
Yeah, and the main goal was to compare the efficacy of different skin temperature measurement devices under that severe environmental load.
So what did they test?
They tested infrared thermography, so like thermal cameras, against traditional conductive devices, which are essentially thermistors physically taped directly to the skin.
And the results were kind of shocking because the infrared cameras failed completely, right?
They did, totally failed.
The data they produced during the exercise phase was just systematically flawed compared to the hardwired thermistors.
Yeah, and the failure really comes down to the physics of human thermoregulation.
Because of the sweat.
Exactly. In a 38-degree chamber, the body rapidly deploys its primary cooling mechanism, which is sweating. And as sweat pools on the skin surface, it undergoes evaporative cooling.
Right, so the latent heat of vaporization pulls thermal energy away from the skin.
Right. So the thermal camera isn't actually reading the true temperature of the dermal tissue where the filler lives.
Oh, it's just reading the sweat.
Yes. It's reading the artificially lowered temperature of the evaporating sweat layer sitting on top of the skin. It's basically an optical illusion.
It's like trying to see a clear reflection in a totally fogged up bathroom mirror.
That is a perfect analogy. It acts as a thermal mirror, distorting the radiant characteristics of the skin itself. The infrared sensor is just blinded by the moisture.
Which really makes you think about the implications for wearable technology.
Yeah.
You know, when a smartwatch claims it's tracking your skin temperature during an intense outdoor run, it's operating in a highly compromised microenvironment.
Oh, completely. But, to be fair, the study also points out that taping a thermistor directly to the skin isn't a flawless solution either.
Wait, why not?
Yeah.
If it's touching the skin, shouldn't it be accurate?
You'd think so, but by applying medical tape over the sensor, you inadvertently create an insulating microclimate.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, you physically trap the heat and prevent localized sweat evaporation at that exact site. So the tissue under the tape becomes artificially hotter than the surrounding exposed skin.
So we are constantly flying blind when it comes to assessing endogenous thermal stress.
Pretty much. Yeah.
But, the sources then pivot from the accidental heat of the gym to the intentional, highly weaponized heat of aesthetic clinics. I'm talking about energy-based devices, or EBDs.
Right, like radio frequency, lasers, high-intensity focused ultrasound.
Exactly. And the core mechanism of action for every single one of those modalities is controlled thermal damage.
It is. The clinical endpoints are dictated entirely by temperature.
So walk us through those temperature thresholds.
Okay, so at roughly 47 degrees Celsius, the heat stimulates fibroblast activation, which jumpstarts neocollagenesis, making new collagen.
Okay, that sounds good.
It is. But if you push the target tissue to 60 degrees, you induce immediate denaturation and contraction of existing collagen fibers, which tightens the skin.
getting hotter.
Yeah, and at 70 degrees, you hit adipocytolysis, effectively destroying fat cells.
Wow. And breaching 85 degrees causes irreversible necrosis, like tissue death, right?
Exactly.
So the obvious paradox here is glaring. If 85 degrees causes permanent damage and 70 degrees melts fat, isn't firing a 47-degree radio frequency laser directly into a face loaded with hyaluronic acid just a recipe for instantly melting the filler?
You would certainly think so, and it actually initiates a process known as thermal degradation via a random scission mechanism.
A random scission mechanism, what does that mean?
So the kinetic energy from the EBD is so intense that it physically breaks the long covalent polymer chains of the hyaluronic acid at completely random intervals.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it doesn't just unravel the matrix, it snaps the structural backbone of the gel, radically plummeting its viscosity and cohesivity.
I mean, the data on this is staggering. When researchers applied a radiofrequency device immediately following an HA filler injection, they recorded a catastrophic 36% reduction in hyaluronic acid levels.
Yeah, over a third of the implant was obliterated in a single session.
That is, I mean, that's thousands of dollars just gone.
Yeah.
Why do dermatologists ever mix these two treatments then?
Because the timing is the critical variable. When they adjusted the protocol and introduced a mandatory 14-day waiting period between the filler injection and the EBD treatment,
What happened?
the thermal degradation dropped from 36% to a mere 7%.
Boy, really? So waiting just 2 weeks provides absolute biological immunity to the heat?
It does. It allows the body's natural regenerative trauma response to take over.
Okay, explain that. How does trauma protect the filler?
Well, when filler is injected, the surrounding tissue reacts. If you wait 14 days, the initial minor heat from earlier integration, or just natural fibroblast activity, has time to synthesize a brand new collagen network.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, and this newly formed collagen physically encapsulates the HA matrix. It forms a biological shield, basically insulating the cross-linked filler from the subsequent massive thermal spike of the EBD.
That is fascinating.
Yep.
So sequencing is literally everything.
It really is.
The heat can either act as a molecular wrecking ball through random scission if applied prematurely, or the body's response to mild heat can construct a defensive fortress around the filler if given the proper runway.
That's a great summary, yeah. But, we've established how environmental heat and mechanical friction passively degrade the matrix. To truly understand this biomechanical battlefield, we have to look at the active targeted chemical eraser.
Ah, hyaluronidase.
Ah,
The microscopic pair of scissors perfectly evolved to dismantle this specific biomaterial.
yes. And the selectivity of this enzyme is just a marvel of biochemistry.
How specific is it?
Very. Hyaluronic acid is a glycosaminoglycan made of repeating disaccharide units, specifically N-acetylglucosamine and D-glucuronic acid. And these units are bound together by a very specific covalent bridge known as a beta-1,4 glycosidic linkage.
And hyaluronidase ignores everything else in the tissue and exclusively targets that beta-1,4 linkage, right? It just cleaves the chain.
Exactly. And what the literature makes incredibly clear is that every human being possesses a unique, genetically determined baseline concentration of endogenous hyaluronidase.
Right, so your genetic profile literally dictates your localized enzymatic activity.
It does.
Hmm.
You could have two patients receive the exact same volume of the exact same filler, injected at the exact same depth by the same clinician.
Mm.
One patient's implant may survive 18 months, while the other's degrades in 7.
That is so unfair.
It is, but the discrepancy is largely driven by their innate enzymatic baseline continuously chewing through the HA matrix.
But this enzyme isn't just an internal variable, is it? It's also the ultimate exogenous failsafe for doctors.
Oh, absolutely.
Like, if a clinician makes a cosmetic error, or much more critically, if the filler embolizes and occludes a blood vessel, they flood the area with concentrated exogenous hyaluronidase to dissolve the blockage and prevent tissue necrosis.
Exactly. And we have a highly illuminating in vitro rheological study that quantified this exact reversal process.
Right. Researchers took 16 commercially available HA fillers spanning 6 distinct manufacturing and cross-linking technologies.
Yeah, and they exposed them to standardized doses of exogenous hyaluronidase and tracked the degradation in real time by monitoring the storage modulus, the G'.
They essentially watched the structural firmness of the gel degrade until it hit a specific mechanical threshold of 30 pascals, right?
Yes, 30 pascals is the critical inflection point.
Why 30?
It's the exact moment where the storage modulus drops below the loss modulus. So in simple terms, the material ceases to behave as a solid, cohesive gel and physically transitions into a liquid state. It loses all structural integrity.
And the timeline to reach that 30 pascal threshold varied wildly depending on the proprietary manufacturing technology, didn't it?
It varied dramatically.
Fillers engineered with Vicross technology demonstrated the highest resistance to enzymatic cleavage. They aggressively held onto their structural matrix.
Right. And on the opposite end of the spectrum, fillers utilizing cohesive polydensified matrix, or CPM technology, collapsed into a liquid state incredibly quickly.
Which really exposes the central terrifying tension in biomaterial engineering. I mean, you have two competing clinical demands.
Exactly. Because on one hand, the patient desires maximum durability. They want a highly cross-linked, resilient polymer that defies their endogenous enzymes and mechanical friction for as long as possible.
But on the other hand, the clinician requires a margin of safety. Time is tissue. If a labial artery is blocked by a rogue bolus of filler, you have minutes before the surrounding tissue begins to die from ischemia.
Yeah, it's a medical emergency.
So if the patient requested a Vicross filler for its longevity, isn't that potentially dangerous? Why would anyone choose a filler that stubbornly resists the antidote meant to save their face?
That is the big question. The resilience that makes it cosmetically superior absolutely makes it medically perilous during an adverse event. Clinicians must understand that reversing highly cross-linked, high G-prime fillers requires a radically different intervention strategy.
Right, because the traditional approach is just injecting one massive localized bolus of hyaluronidase and hoping it floods the matrix.
Yeah, and that is clinically insufficient for these advanced technologies.
Which is why the rheological data heavily supports a multi-dose protocol instead.
Yes.
Like fighting a fire dumping one giant bucket of water all at once isn't as effective as a continuous steady stream from a hose to keep the reaction going. So instead of a single massive flood, administering microdoses like 50 microliters every 5 minutes drastically accelerates the degradation kinetics.
It really does, and it all comes down to enzyme substrate binding kinetics.
How does that work?
When you flood the tissue with a massive single dose, you instantly oversaturate the available receptor sites on the outer layer of the HA bolus.
So there's nowhere for the extra enzyme to go.
Exactly. The excess enzyme has nowhere to bind. It either diffuses into the surrounding native tissue or rapidly degrades before it can even access the deeper, highly cross-linked nodes of the filler.
So you're basically wasting the chemical ammunition.
Yeah, but by pulsing the area with a steady stream of microdoses, you allow the first wave of hyaluronidase to cleave the outer beta-1,4 linkages.
And then as that outer layer transitions to a liquid and washes away, it exposes the inner matrix.
Exactly. And the subsequent microdoses arrive right as fresh substrate becomes available. You maintain a continuous, highly efficient catalytic reaction.
Methodically stripping the polymer network layer by layer until the total structural G' plummets below that 30 pascal threshold.
That's exactly how it works.
Wow. So synthesizing everything we've pulled from these clinical studies, the concept of the static implant is just entirely dead.
It's completely obsolete.
Dermal fillers are highly engineered, dynamic biomaterials forced to survive in a spectacularly hostile environment. Their longevity is dictated by this intricate matrix of variables: the structural resilience of their specific cross-linking technology, the mechanical shear stress from your daily facial movements, the hypermetabolic heat and friction you generate at the gym, and of course, the unique enzymatic profile coded right into your DNA.
And understanding this biomechanical battlefield elevates the entire field of aesthetic medicine. It forces clinicians to respect the complex interplay between rheology and individual patient physiology.
Right.
And it empowers you, the patient, to recognize how your daily lifestyle actively degrades or preserves your investment.
Which actually leaves us with a provocative glimpse into where this is all heading.
Yeah.
We've established that your baseline endogenous hyaluronidase activity is genetically predetermined, right?
Yes.
And we know that different filler technologies resist that enzyme at vastly different rates.
We do.
So could the future of aesthetic medicine involve a simple saliva swab to sequence your exact enzymatic profile before choosing a filler brand?
Oh, that would be incredible. It's the logical progression moving away from a trial and error approach to filler selection and towards true personalized biomaterial matching.
Imagine walking into a clinic, And before a needle ever touches your face, the clinician takes a DNA saliva swab. They sequence your enzymatic profile, analyze your baseline metabolic markers, and an algorithm outputs the exact proprietary cross-linking technology that perfectly balances durability and reversibility for your specific biology.
A filler customized to the exact speed of your internal tide. It
Exactly.
would completely eliminate the guesswork and totally redefine the limits of cosmetic longevity.
An incredibly compelling horizon for aesthetic medicine, for sure. Well, thank you for exploring the invisible science beneath the surface with us. Keep questioning the mechanics of what you think you know, and we will see you on the next deep dive.